Hey, welcome back for another episode in this Linux crash course. Today we're going to talk about wildcards and being able to search and find things in our file system. So let's get at it. All of this information is in this GitHub repo. It's under Linux-crash-course. All the content is there. In previous videos, we've already talked about this file system, and we've talked about a lot about navigating the file system and creating files and deleting files, creating directories and symbolic links and all of this stuff. What we're going to do now is we're going to talk about these things here towards the bottom. Finding files or finding information in our system. So let's go ahead and move over to our terminal window. And just to orient everybody, if I print the working directory, I am in my home directory. And if I LL or LS here, you're going to see I have this directory called files. And if I do a tree, you're going to see this directory has a README, it has a file 1, there's a bunch of nested files here, and there's a file 6 and a names, and you can see all of that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch into this files directory, so I'm just right inside this, and let's go ahead and clear this out so we have some space. And we're going to use kind of echo in kind of a weird way. I think it's weird anyways, but anyways, so if I say something like echo and I feed it a wildcard, it's going to look and interpret this and see if it can find any things that kind of match that. So if I hit enter here, it's easier to talk about it. It's almost like me typing ls. So if I type ls, readme dir1, dir2 names, ls highlights purple and green, the different directories, has a little bit different spacing, but echo kind of shows me the same content. So but what I'm going to use is I'm going to use echo, and I'm just going to use it to help us learn about wildcards. Let's clear this back out again. Echo star. Star is a wildcard, and essentially it means match anything anywhere at all. If I hit echo star, everything matches that wildcard. But if I were to type something like echo, let's say, has to start with an X and then star, nothing's going to match because there's nothing that starts with an X, but I want you to see how this behaves. So then echo behaves like it would normally behave, and it would just echo this content. That's why I kind of think it's a little bit weird. So if it has a valid wildcard and it applies kind of that wildcard as a filter, and if there is some results, then it'll show you the results. If it has a wildcard, it's a valid wildcard, and it applies that filter, but it doesn't find anything, then it's just going to print the filter back out. So you kind of see it there. That's how it just behaves. So anyways, with that behind us, if I do things like echo dir star, then this wildcard pattern is going to say dir. It's going to match those first two right here, dir1, dir2, and it should print dir1, dir2. And so I'm just going over the different wildcard options here so that we can learn how to use them in a little bit, and we'll use them with some different commands. So let's try another one. Echo, I want to say it can begin with anything. It has to have an I and an R, and then it can end with anything. Let's run this. I get dir1, dir3 again. Let's say echo, it has to begin with a D, can have anything in the middle, but it has to end in a 3. This doesn't say how many characters in the middle, it just says anything in the middle. It can have an I and an R in the middle, and it will match, and you'll just get dir3. If I wanted to do a wildcard on a single character, I can say it has to look like this. It has to have a D, any character, and then a 3. Now this single character, there isn't a file in here that matches that. I'm expecting it will print D question 3, and we can see that here. It just printed out the filter itself. But if I switch my filter up a little bit and I say D question 3, so that's D. It has to have 2 characters, I don't care what they are, followed by a 3. It'll match the dir3, the directory 3 there. So let's try something else. This has an E in it, and this has an E in it. So let's see if we can do anything that has an E in it. So I don't care what it starts with. Has to have an E, and has to end with I don't care what. You can see that it found names, but it did not find the capital names. Okay, so if we want to try to match this uppercase E and this lowercase e, I think that the syntax is using these brackets, and we have E, uppercase E, star, and now I get them both. This syntax says it can start with any characters and it can end with any characters, but in the middle it needs to have an E, a lowercase e, or an uppercase e. So that's what those brackets mean. It can be either one of those, and then we match both. Okay, and so those wildcards are useful when we want to do things where maybe we're going to say, let's list out any directories that maybe have like dir. So dir star, I'm going to list them all out. And so you can see here what it's doing. ls dir, here's dir1, has file 1 in it. Here's dir3, has dir4 and dir7. Now I could say ls-la and then dir star, and then you'll see it list both. Directory 1, directory 3. Is this practical? I wouldn't probably do this kind of wildcard. But the importance is sometimes when we're doing bash scripting, which is going to be in later videos, I want to be able to cast a little bit broader net based upon some expression where I can select different files. So that's what these expression and these wildcards are useful for. Another example of where maybe I want to use a wildcard is I want to find a particular file. And so I have these files. This is file 7, this is file 6, this is file 1. They all have the same pattern. They all start with the word file and they have some number at the end. The command that I can use to find or search has this format. So I have find, and then it takes the directory that you want to search in. So I want to search the current directory, and the current directory is always designated by a dot. So if you see dot or maybe a dot slash, that's the current directory. And then I need to give it which file or what kind of file I'm looking for. I'm going to look based upon name, and I want to see it fit this expression, file and asterisk. So I don't care what's after that, but I want it to be like that. I'm going to hit enter, and let's see what it finds for it. This find command searched in the current directory, which is this dot directory, and it searched all of these. Did it find file 1? It did, under dir1/file1. Did it find file 6? It did. dir3, dir4, dir5, dir6, file 6. Did it find file 7? It did. dir3, dir7, and file 7. The order of these, I'm not sure it's predictable, so I wouldn't guarantee they predict, but it did find all 3 of these files. So that's how I would search and find files. Another example is, let's say I want to find the names file. Search the current directory and anything that looks like names. Here there's 2 of them. There's dot names in the main directory, and then there's names in dir6, which is kind of in that big long nested directory. And just as a reminder, if I cat out what's in names, inside that file, the file is called names. Inside file, there's these 6 names: Bob, Ben, Tom, Joe, Sarah, and Henry. Now, another very common thing is you have to search a bunch of files. You're looking for some content. We want to be able to issue a command to be able to search into the files themselves. When I type the other command, find, it's finding files based upon last time we did was like a name. And we said, okay, well, the name is anything that looks like this. And so we found those files. Now I want to search into the files. So to do that, we're going to use a grep command. Now grep will actually go into the files itself. What we're going to do is we're going to provide it a -r for recursive. I do need to start it off in some directory. So I'm going to start it off in the current directories, just so we're going to grep and we're going to recursively go into all of these different directories and look at all the files in there. And I think I got to put this in quotes. We'll try that without quotes in a second here. The next thing is -e, and I need to provide it what I'm looking for. And I remember that Bob was in that names directory. So it should be in this one. It should be in that one too. So it should find them in both. And so I'm going to hit enter here. And so you can see it recursively went in and it says, hey, I found the word Bob in these 2 files. So I found it in that path right there. And I found it in that path. Grep went through all those files and it looked and it found it inside. I want to make a few changes here. So under names, so if we cat out names, right now this one right here has Bob, Ben, Joe. Okay, so I made a few modifications to our names file right here. So I'm going to cat names out so you can see the changes I made to it. And I'm not going to show you how I made those changes. That's in a different video on editing files and things like that. But for now, you can see I added Bobcat, added Joe Bob as new names. 2 new names. There's also a Bob in here, and what we're going to do is we're going to use some of our grep options to help us find some of these things. Clear this out again, and the last time we ran grep, we ran a -r. I'm going to run it without the quotes. Let's see if we can go without the quotes. Just curious here. So it works without quotes too, so I like that. I like that better. It's a little bit just more succinct. So I found Henry, and I found it in these 2 files, and that's totally fine. So let's run that same command on Bob. And let's see what it finds. And it's going to say it found it a whole bunch of different times. So it found Bob by itself. It found Bob by itself in that file, but also found Bobcat, and it found Joe Bob. When you grep, it's not just finding whole words. All right, it can, but in this case, it found Bob even in partial words. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another option here, and we're going to add a W option, which is going to look for just whole words. We're back down to where we were before, where it just found the word Bob. There's another option here of N, and if I had an N, then it's going to show me actually the line number that it found it on. So I found it on line 6. I found it on line 6. So if I go back up to recursive N, it's going to tell me it found, Bob on 6, Bobcat on 7, and Joe Bob on 8. If I try to find Joe, that should find it a couple spots, right? Joe Bob, and it says 3. So Joe and then Joe Bob. If I just type Joe lowercase, it doesn't find it. So it's case sensitive on how it's searching right now. But let's see if there's a command where I can make it case insensitive. So here's the help, and a lot of information here. So pattern, match only whole words, match lines. So see, we just did the -W for the whole words. Here, -I is ignore case. That's what we want to try to do. So let's rerun this, and we'll put an I over there to ignore case. So now you see I put lowercase Joe. It didn't care about the casing. It found Joe in 3 places. So very powerful. Again, has a lot of different options. If you just want to get it so it's just spitting out only the file names, and this might be important for like a script. I don't want to necessarily have to parse all this extra stuff out. I just want those file names. I can add an L on here. Recursive, N is show the line number. I don't need that anymore because L is going to override it. I do need my case insensitivity, so I kept I, and then I run it, and then I just get my file names. And you can see it really found 3 of them before, but it's just giving me the 2 files. It's in both those files. So just to summarize, we used find to search for files, and I had different ways I could do it. So I used a -name that's in here somewhere, right here, a -name, and then I gave it the pattern. And there's a lot of other different options that you can use to find things. So that was one thing we did. And then we used the grep command to actually look inside of files. And so if I want to search for inside the files, then I can use the grep command and then follow these different patterns to find files that contain certain things. So that's 2 easy ways to search things. We covered wildcards on this also. And that's it for this video. We'll see you next time.